Okay, welcome everyone. I'm joined by Daniel Klim, the president and CEO of New Jersey Restaurant and Hospitality Association, and my partner Brent Pohlman, who's counsel to the association, to talk about the tip credit. Daniel, why don't we just jump right in? The current status of the tip credit in the state of New Jersey, there's pending legislation to change that. Is that a good thing for the community and the workers and the owners in the restaurant community?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's not a good thing. There are 20,000 restaurants here in New Jersey. There's 375,000 employees. No one has asked us to make this change. They're happy with the current system. They know that they have the opportunity to set their own ceiling as to what they want to make. They don't want to be mandated to make the state minimum wage because then that's all they know they're going to make.
And what's the current status now with the pending legislation? I understand that you've been involved intimately. You've been in Trenton. You're around the state today and the coming days. What do we need to know in the restaurant community about where things stand?
So last week, there was a hearing at the State House in Trenton. The restaurant industry really came together. We had more than 150 people at that hearing. Leading up to that hearing, there were over 12,000 emails to committee members saying to please vote no on this bill. And it should be known that this bill only exists in the Assembly right now. There is no Senate companion bill. So we testified for more than 2 hours. Industry leaders, owners, bartenders, servers, everyone was on the same page that said, please leave the tip credit alone.
Brent, from the legal side, you hear something like the tip credit and wanting to bring everybody up to minimum wage or at least minimum wage. Why is this something that people in the community, in the restaurant community, are not in favor of?
Yeah, oftentimes the proponents of legislation like this claim that they have good intentions, and their intention is to lift the minimum wage of workers in the restaurant and hospitality industry. What most of them don't recognize, though, is that New Jersey's wage and hour laws, as it pertains to tipped employees, it's a very highly regulated area of the law, more so than even just a regular minimum wage employee and regular wage and hour and wage payment laws. The employers that utilize the tip credit have obligations to their employees that go above and beyond just a regular employer. And those obligations help to ensure that those employees are not taken advantage of, that they are appropriately paid, that they receive all of their compensation, and that they receive the minimum wage, if not more. Some points to be aware of. If you're an employer that's utilizing the tip credit as part of your compensation plan, you have to inform your employees in writing that they are a tipped employee. You have to inform them what their minimum tipped hourly amount is, and then what they would have to be paid up to the minimum wage. You have to inform them of any changes to this plan. You have to ensure that tips are only received by the tipped employer, those employees who engage in tip service. Employers can't share among the tips themselves with management or can't allocate those to employees who are not considered tipped employees. And if employees are not made aware of this, if they're not given this information, the employer is not permitted to have them or treat them as a tipped employee. And what that means is that if there's ever not just in that instance, but if an employer violates the payment laws as it relates to tipped employees, it's treated as if the tipped employee only received the reduced minimum wage. So let me give you an example. Let's say that a tipped employee is paid, approximately right now it's $5 and change per hour, and let's say the employer doesn't follow all the regulations or doesn't properly pay them. If they file a wage and hour claim or they bring an action, the government and the courts treat it as though that employee was only paid that minimum amount. They actually ignore the tips. And so the employee or the employer, if they don't do a tip pool or a tip credit policy or a tip pool policy correctly, and miss on an overtime payment or miss on the number of hours that are documented and paid for, it's treated as if none of those tips were ever received by the employee. And the employee is actually able to obtain almost a windfall against the employer from the reduced hourly minimum all the way up to minimum wage or overtime rate. And so it's a very significant penalty on an employer, and that really forces and compels employers to be very careful when operating and working with tipped employees, tracking their hours and tracking how much they're paid. Some other protections tipped employees have. If the tips don't amount to minimum wage, the employer has to make up the difference. Additionally, the tip credit doesn't apply to overtime. So if employees are working a significant amount of hours, if they're over 40 hours in a week, then they get minimum wage plus time and a half, which is a little over $22 per hour, plus their tips for all those overtime hours. So, while we hear from proponents of legislation like this that their concern is the employee, the laws that have currently been adopted by the legislature and that are implemented by the Department of Labor really do protect these employees and put potential penalties and liability on employers that is so significant that you don't see the type of errors and issues that you may in a non-tipped business, because these employers know of the liability that they may be faced with.
Daniel, I know you're very busy and you're probably running to the next event or maybe something like this to deal with this issue that's really a hot topic right now. What is the association recommending to owners and servers as we move forward here? What's your tip for how we can continue to be heard as part of the community?
I think we need to continue to educate people. Educate people that tipped workers do in fact make minimum wage. In fact, in New Jersey, the average minimum tipped employee is making $22 an hour. Many are making much more than that, which is why they don't want to go back to the state mandated $15.49. So we need to continue to educate people on how the industry works, educate people on how the salaries works, educate people on how tipped employees, the better they are, the more earning potential they have. And one of our members who testified likened being a tipped employee to being somebody who works in commissions, in sales. And I thought that was a really good analogy, because salespeople have a base salary, and the better they do, the more they can earn. And I think it's a similar analogy when you look at it at a tipped employee. A tipped employee has that base salary, but the better they are, the more they have the opportunity to earn. And so the more we can educate our legislators, the public, additional employees, owners and operators, I think we're going to get the word out that the current system, the way it works, is working very well and has worked very well for a long time.
Thank you. Daniel Klim, President and CEO of the New Jersey Restaurant and Hospitality Association. Brent Pohlman, my partner at Mandelbaum Barrett, counsel to the association. Thank you both for your time, and good luck to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much for having me.